At 4:30 on November 7th, 2025, two Venezuelan diesel-electric submarines quietly moved through the Caribbean. Their sonar teams believed they were approaching a single American amphibious vessel. The submarines S-21 Bolivar and S-23 Sucre had been following the contact for nearly 18 hours, using coastal radar data that showed one large object lingering near Venezuela's exclusive economic zone. Their assignment seemed straightforward: launch a warning torpedo, send a clear signal, and then slip beneath the thermal layer before anyone could react. But there was something the Venezuelan Navy didn't realize. Their radar system, more than 4 decades old, had mistakenly combined 6 different ships into one blurred return. What looked like a lone amphibious vessel wasn't alone at all. The submarines were actually moving toward the USS Gerald R Ford, a 100,000-ton nuclear-powered aircraft carrier valued at around $13 billion. Around it sailed a powerful escort, 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and a Ticonderoga-class cruiser. Together, the strike group carried more firepower than the entire Venezuelan surface fleet, and the Venezuelan submarines were about to announce themselves with a torpedo. The real question wasn't whether the Americans would notice the threat. The real question was what would happen in the 3 seconds between detection and reaction. Because launching a weapon toward a United States carrier, even by mistake, is a gamble with enormous consequences. If you want to understand how this close call unfolded and how split-second decisions at sea can stop situations from spiraling out of control, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next incident that nearly changed everything. 3:45. Venezuelan Operations Center, Caracas. Inside a dim command room beneath the Ministry of Defense, analysts studied radar screens that hadn't been upgraded since 1987. The equipment hummed softly. Green phosphor displays flickered with every sweep of the antenna. On one screen, a large contact blinked near the maritime boundary, about 70 nautical miles north of La Guaira. The signature was enormous, larger than a frigate and steadier than a cargo ship, and it had remained in the same area for almost 2 days. Senior Lieutenant Carlos Medina leaned over the display, tracing the contact with his finger. According to the radar return, the object measured roughly 300 meters in length. That size matched an American Wasp-class amphibious assault ship. Intelligence reports from the previous month had already noted increased United States naval activity in the region. Washington had also been openly discussing Venezuela's growing ties with outside powers. To Medina, the presence of a single American vessel so close to Venezuelan waters didn't feel accidental. It looked like a deliberate show of strength, a test of how Venezuela would respond. He forwarded the radar data to Fleet Command with a recommendation: send submarines to investigate and, if necessary, deliver a controlled warning. The response came back within an hour. Dispatch the S-21 Bolivar and S-23 Sucre. Approach within engagement distance. If required, launch a single warning torpedo on a shallow setting. Do not escalate beyond that. What no one in Caracas realized was that the radar picture was misleading them. The coastal radar arrays lacked modern signal processing technology. In the warm, humid Caribbean air, atmospheric ducting had bent and scattered radar signals from multiple American ships. The system's filters couldn't separate the overlapping echoes. 6 vessels moving in tight formation appeared on the screen as one massive contact. The technicians interpreted exactly what their equipment showed them, and their equipment simply couldn't reveal the full picture. The Venezuelan submarines left La Guaira Naval Base at 5 a.m. on November 6th. Before departure, both crews received a clear briefing: locate the single American ship, deliver a firm message, and avoid triggering a larger conflict. The S-21 and S-23 were Russian-built Kilo-class diesel-electric submarines. When running on battery power, they were extremely quiet and well-suited for operations in shallow coastal waters. Each carried Type 53 torpedoes and a crew trained primarily for defensive missions along the nation's coastline. Together, the 2 submarines were worth roughly $300 million. Above them in the Caribbean, however, sailed a naval force worth many times that amount. At 4:15 in the Caribbean Sea, about 70 nautical miles north of Venezuela, the USS Gerald R Ford moved steadily through calm water at 18 knots. Around the carrier, 4 destroyers maintained a protective screen, spaced between 8 and 12 nautical miles apart. To the northeast, the cruiser USS Vela Gulf held its position, its powerful Spy-1 radar scanning the skies for aircraft and incoming threats. Beneath the surface, long-towed sonar arrays stretched behind the destroyers, quietly listening for any unusual activity underwater. The entire formation moved with the calm confidence of a force that dominated the surrounding ocean. On the bridge of the ford, officers monitored routine maritime traffic. A cargo vessel passed far to the east, while small fishing boats worked closer to the Venezuelan coastline. The early morning watch felt ordinary. No alerts, no warnings. Just another patrol during freedom of navigation operations in international waters. But far below the surface, the two Venezuelan submarines were steadily closing the distance. They moved slowly at 4 knots to keep their noise levels low. Inside the submarines, passive sonar systems built a detailed acoustic picture of the busy waters above. Operators could hear propeller rhythms, the vibrations of ship hulls, and the deep, steady rumble of large engines. The sound suggested several large vessels nearby. The sonar teams reported multiple contacts, but the mission orders had been based on radar data from Caracas, and that radar picture showed only one ship. At 4:28, the S-21 Bolivar reached its planned firing position. The crew had practiced this exact scenario many times. The plan called for a warning shot. A torpedo launched at shallow depth with a programmed timer. After running for 90 seconds, the device would automatically deactivate underwater. The blast would not be intended to damage anything. Instead, it would deliver a clear signal. We know you're here, and we can reach you. Inside the cramped control room, Lieutenant Commander Alejandro Ruiz reviewed the firing solution one last time. Target bearing 015 degrees, range 4,000 meters, depth setting 6 meters, detonation timer 90 seconds. Ruiz glanced toward his weapons officer and calmly gave the command. Tube 1, fire. The Type 53 torpedo shot from the submarine with a sharp hydraulic push. Moments later, its motor engaged and the propellers began spinning at high speed. In the silent underwater world, the sound spread instantly, a bright acoustic signal cutting through the dark ocean. Sonar operators across the American strike group heard it immediately. 429, USS Vela Gulf, Combat Information Center, Petty Officer 2nd Class. David Torres sat at his sonar station with headphones pressed tightly against his ears. The ocean's background noise flowed steadily through the speakers. Distant shipping, marine life, the quiet pulse of the sea. Then something sharp pierced the soundscape. A fast mechanical tone, rising, accelerating. Torres ripped off his headphones and turned to the watch officer. Torpedo in the water, bearing 205. High-speed screws detected. The Combat Information Center instantly came alive. The officer of the deck grabbed the radio. All stations, this is Vela Gulf. Torpedo launch detected. Prepare defensive measures. Alarms echoed across the strike group. The Gerald R Ford immediately began turning to port while increasing speed to 22 knots. The destroyers shifted their positions, moving between the carrier and the direction of the launch. Acoustic decoys splashed into the sea, creating false sound targets designed to confuse the incoming weapon. On the flight deck, an MH-60 Romeo helicopter roared to life, its engine spinning up as the crew prepared to deploy sonar buoys and begin the hunt beneath the waves. The American formation had prepared for a moment like this countless times. Every sailor understood their role, and every system activated in a precise sequence. In less than 45 seconds, the strike group had shifted from a routine patrol to full defensive readiness. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan torpedo continued its course. It traveled just 6 meters beneath the surface, its internal timer counting down from 90 seconds. The guidance system followed a rough bearing toward the noise above, but the weapon had never been intended to strike anything. It was meant as a signal, a warning delivered through sound, pressure, and seawater. At 4:30, the timer reached 0. The internal charge detonated, sending a powerful pressure wave through the water. On American sonar screens, the blast appeared instantly, a sharp acoustic spike that echoed across every monitoring station. To the operators, it looked exactly like a torpedo that had completed its run and detonated after failing to hit its target. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the Vela Gulf, analysts quickly reviewed the sequence. 2 submerged contacts had been detected. A torpedo launch had been confirmed. A high-speed run followed, ending in a detonation. The pattern strongly resembled a failed attack. Captain Jennifer Hayes stood at the center of the room, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The situation was clear but tense. 2 submarines, 1 torpedo, 1 explosion, and a carrier sitting at the heart of the formation. She had only seconds to decide what to do next. Order a response or wait. The sonar display showed no additional torpedoes, no continuing signals of another launch, just silence after the blast. Hayes quickly evaluated the situation. A real attack would likely involve several weapons launched together. A coordinated strike would attempt simultaneous impacts from multiple directions. This felt different. Aggressive, yes, but incomplete. She made her decision. Hold fire, maintain defensive posture, continue tracking. That brief order prevented a confrontation that neither side wanted. 4:35, S-21 Bolivar, depth 120 meters. Inside the Venezuelan submarine, the crew heard the distant echo of the underwater blast reverberate through the hull. Lieutenant Commander Alejandro Ruiz gave a small nod. The signal had been delivered. Now their priority was to leave before the Americans could determine their exact location. He ordered the submarine to descend to 150 meters and turn southwest at minimal speed. Then the sonar operator spoke up. Multiple contacts above us. High-speed maneuvers. Active sonar scanning. Sir, there are at least 5 large ships. Ruiz froze. 5 ships. The radar briefing had shown only 1. He pulled up the mission intelligence again and read it carefully. Single American amphibious vessel, routine patrol. No escorts. But the sounds rising through the water told a completely different story. The sonar picked up the distinctive turbine whine of gas turbine destroyers. There was also the deep, steady pulse of a massive nuclear reactor. Above them, several large vessels were moving in a coordinated pattern. The unmistakable formation used to protect something extremely valuable. They hadn't approached a lone amphibious ship. They had moved directly toward a carrier strike group. Ruiz felt a heavy knot in his stomach. A carrier strike group carried enough firepower to overwhelm nearly any target in the region in a very short time. And he had just launched a torpedo directly toward the center of that formation, even if it had been only a warning shot, even if the detonation had been harmless. It didn't change the fact that their position had just been revealed to one of the most powerful naval forces in the world. He turned to his crew. All stop! Silent running, descend to 200 meters, no unnecessary noise. The S-21 Bolivar and S-23 Sucre slip deeper into the water, descending beneath the thermal layer, where sonar detection becomes much more difficult. From the perspective of American sensors, the submarine slowly faded from view. Their retreat was cautious, slow, and extremely tense. 5:15, USS Gerald R. Ford, Flag Bridge. Rear Admiral Patricia Crane studied the acoustic data alongside her staff. The timeline was now clear. 2 submarines had approached the strike group. One of them had launched a torpedo configured for shallow depth and a short run. After 90 seconds, the weapon had automatically detonated. No additional launches followed, and the underwater contacts had withdrawn. Crane leaned back slightly in her chair. It looked very much like a warning shot from a Navy that believed it was confronting a single vessel. For a moment, she almost smiled. The Venezuelan submarines had unknowingly approached an entire carrier strike group and attempted to send a message with a single torpedo. It was a bit like tossing a stone at a tank, and only afterward realizing the tank wasn't alone. The real question now was how to respond. Escalating the situation would achieve little. The Venezuelan government would likely deny the event. Washington would issue a formal protest. Caracas would probably describe it as a navigation misunderstanding. And within a few months, both navies would likely be operating in the same waters again. Rear Admiral Patricia Crane authorized a short message to Fleet Command. Contact with Venezuelan submarines. 1 warning torpedo launched and self-detonated. No damage, no casualties. Strike group remains on station. Recommendation: continue monitoring without escalation. After sending the report, she closed the file and looked out across the calm sea. Somewhere beneath those waves, 2 submarine crews were probably having the most stressful morning of their careers. 6 o'clock. Venezuelan Operations Center, Caracas. Senior Lieutenant Medina stood in front of his commanding officer, explaining what had happened. The radar system had combined several contacts into one large return. The submarines had approached an entire carrier strike group instead of a single ship. Their warning torpedo had detonated near one of the most valuable naval vessels in the United States fleet. And somehow, there had been no response. The room went quiet. Finally, the commanding officer asked the only question that truly mattered. "Did we start a war?" Medina shook his head. "No, sir. They held their fire." A quiet breath moved through the room. There would be investigations later. Reports would be written. Equipment would likely be upgraded. But the immediate crisis had passed. The Venezuelan Navy had taken a risk with a warning shot, and the situation ended peacefully only because the Americans chose restraint instead of immediate retaliation. By midday, the USS Gerald R. Ford and its escorts continued their patrol route as if nothing unusual had happened. the Venezuelan submarines returned to La Guaira and submitted reports about the encounter, documents that would likely remain classified for many years. Neither side made the incident public. Neither government had much interest in explaining how close things had come to a serious confrontation because of a radar error and a misjudgment. The numbers alone revealed the imbalance. Venezuela had deployed submarines worth about $300 million, armed with torpedoes costing roughly $70,000 each. The United States had a carrier strike group valued at more than $30 billion, protected by sensor systems so sensitive they could detect extremely small sounds across vast distances underwater. One side launched a single warning shot, the other side paused for 3 seconds. Those 3 seconds prevented a confrontation that could have unfolded very quickly. That short pause is the reason the event remained a close call instead of becoming a major naval crisis. It also highlighted something important about modern military operations. Technology can fail. Intelligence reports can be incomplete. Radar systems can produce misleading pictures. But the decisions made by trained officers in moments of pressure can prevent small mistakes from turning into major disasters. For analysts observing the Caribbean region, the situation raised several uncomfortable questions. If a 40-year-old radar system could mistake an entire carrier group for a single ship, what other gaps might exist in regional defense networks? If 2 submarines could approach within torpedo distance before being fully recognized, how many other countries might be quietly studying the reactions of major naval forces? And if the next warning shot came from a navy with less caution or more advanced equipment, would 3 seconds still be enough time to avoid a crisis? Eventually, the sea returned to its usual calm. Radar screens returned to normal traffic, but the memory of that morning stayed with every operations center that reviewed the classified recordings. Because in the end, it was not overwhelming firepower or advanced technology that prevented escalation. It was the decision of one captain to wait 3 seconds before acting. And sometimes that thin thread of human judgment is the only thing separating a misunderstanding from a full-scale conflict. If you enjoy detailed breakdowns of real naval close calls like this one, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next incident that almost changed everything.